Y'all, I know we all love a good to-do list, a good productivity system, a good way to get things done. I know. I love it too. But herein lies the problem. When you have ADHD, there is this black hole somewhere in between intention to do things and actually getting them done, and we don't really know what happens there. So, in my previous video, I talked about time management skills for ADHDers, and I highly recommend that you go back and watch that video after you've watched this one. Stay here, don't go anywhere, because today we're going to talk all things temporal discounting, which is a human tendency that we all have to not value things that are way off in the future, and also that spicy little ADHD tendency to either be in the now or the not now. We're covering it all today, so let's get right to it. So, in my first video, I talked about time management being a challenge for ADHDers because it requires attention management. And when you struggle with that, it can be a real pickle. And I offer suggestions on how to get around that in that video. But in today's video, let's focus on the ideas of temporal discounting and now, not now, and how that impacts our ability to get things done and what we can do about it. Now, the idea of temporal discounting is really just devaluing things that are in the future that don't impact us now. So, having a strong retirement fund, having a healthy and strong body, all of these things are things that we have to invest in now to have a better tomorrow. But it's really hard to follow through on the things we need to do today to invest in our future selves because we generally don't feel connected enough to that person. That person is always somebody who's off in the future, no matter where we are. So it's really easy to discount the value of anything we do today that will benefit that stranger of the future. Now, that, as I mentioned, is something that all humans deal with, especially in today's culture. But add to that the tendency for ADHDers to think of time perception as in the now and not now, a term that was coined by Dr. Russell Barkley, and it illustrates our tendency to be focused on what's right in front of us. So maybe it's something that we're really interested in, or maybe it's a burning dumpster fire of a deadline that we just blew up, but whatever it is, we are focused on that in the moment. Anything else that is tomorrow or next Thursday is not even a concept. But with the concept of now, not now, we're just not thinking about the future in general. So it can be really challenging for us to initiate a project and then plan all the tasks that need to happen in order to execute and then see it through to fruition. The best way I can illustrate this idea of now, not now is when you sit down on a Sunday afternoon to plan your week and you have the best intentions to have an amazing week ahead. So you time block and you list out your to-dos and you organize it all and you've got it all set up. And that feels really good and doable in the moment. However, when you get into your week, those time blocks don't feel like individual things. They kind of feel like this one big blob of time that doesn't really have delineated starts and stops to it. But then when we get into our week, those time blocks start to feel less defined and it just becomes like a big blob of time and we get lost in it or overwhelmed by it. So that is the idea of now and not now. And it's a very clear reason why getting to-dos to done can be really tricky for us, but it's not impossible. The other thing to consider is a potential empathy gap. So on that Sunday, when you sit down to plan your week ahead, you may be feeling energetic and you're just excited for the week ahead and all the things that you're going to do. But by the time you get to Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning, and you're trying to truck through all of these to-dos along with all the other crap that life puts on your plate throughout the week, you start to feel exhausted. So you don't have that same level of energy when you're in the thick of your to-dos as you did when you were originally planning it. And that can be a real hang up for all of us. But the more you go through your process of planning your weeks and getting more and more refined with that skill, and the more self-awareness you build as you go through your week, you're going to get better at planning accordingly and creating the white space you know you need to manage your energy throughout the week. So when it comes to now, not now, how do we actually manage for this as ADHDers? I wish I had the perfect answer for you, but I don't. So I'm going to give you the real unsatisfying one, which is truthfully the best way to go about it. Structure your week around a calendar and make sure that you come back to your calendar several times throughout the day so that you can keep track of what the now is and not worry so much about the not now, because hopefully you have planned the not now that you can get to it when it becomes the now, and then it'll be important. Does that make sense? And if you're new to this or you're feeling overwhelmed by the idea of actually planning out your week, there's two things I would recommend. First of all, get yourself a planning buddy, somebody else who can plan with you because that effective body doubling can be really helpful. The other thing I recommend you do is follow a few of my Plan With Me videos. That's why I make so many of them, because I'm trying to hone the skill for myself and share my process with the ADHD community so that we can all build this skill together and get more and more precise about how to plan our week in a way that matches our energy, our time, our demands, and helps us reach our goals, which is the most important thing after all. Now let's come back and talk about that issue of temporal discounting with the lens of ADHD. And I think that this is a big reason why we become very impulsive, because we have fast brains with very faulty brakes being our executive function. When we have brilliant ideas to do something like take a year off and travel the world and see new things, our executive function isn't necessarily online fast enough to stop us from cashing out a retirement fund in order to pay for it. So that's why we often find ourselves with a lot of money problems and disordered eating, because we have these impulses, but our brain is not necessarily telling us to slow our roll when it should. So what do we do about this? I wish I had a scientific answer to give you, but I don't. So I'm going to give you a personal anecdote instead. I dropped out of high school early, and I was about 21 before I went back to an adult education center to complete my high school education. From there, I went on to college for a year, and then from there, after I realized that, whoa, I actually am smart, I went on to university. And in order to fund university, I took out the maximum student loans that I possibly could, not only to fund my education, but also to get myself a car, a few cute outfits for school. You know the drill. So by the time I graduated, I was in serious debt and it was overwhelming. I remember my first job out of university, I was making under $30,000 a year, but my student loan payment was $800 a month. And I felt so much shame and overwhelmed because of that debt. Then I had to go out and get myself a job in order to pay for the student loans and feed myself. So I ended up in corporate, where that was never the right path for me, but it was the only path that I knew possible in order to pay for all these student loans. So I found myself in a hole that I had dug for myself of debt, where I had to work in order to pay off the debt. And I hated my job, but I didn't have a choice. And that feeling was stifling for me. I couldn't breathe. I hated it, and it was one of the most depressing periods of my life. Fast forward a couple of years to the dot-com bubble, and I was working for a tech company at the time that was doing really well. And I had the great fortune of having some stock options that I was able to cash out for about $150,000 to $200,000, which was at the time and still now a life-changing amount. Now, 1.0 Karen would have taken that money, paid off her student loans, and bought herself a bunch of useless crap because she deserved it, right? I'd be soothing my emotions. But because I had had such a visceral reaction to being in debt and feeling financially insecure, that absolutely did not happen. I took out enough money to pay out my loans. I put a small down payment on a house, a small amount of money towards a wedding, and then I put the rest in retirement funds and did not touch it ever again. And the reason why I was able to make that change was because that moment of visceral pain changed my money story forever. I never again wanted to have to live with the consequences of my earlier self's poor financial decisions. So in that moment, I knew that I would only make sound financial decisions going forward. And to this day, that has been my money narrative. And I will never find myself in that position again because of that experience. So I share that story because it's an example of how I was viscerally able to put myself forward in time and take myself back in time in order to connect my current self with my future self to make better decisions. So I think it's really helpful to look at your life and the choices that you have made and how you've suffered as a consequence of those choices, and ask yourself, are you willing to let your future self suffer those consequences ever again? And if the answer is a strong hell no, then that is a great place to start. And obviously, this isn't black or white thinking. Just because you want to do well by your future self doesn't mean you have to make decisions today that is going to be insufferable or make you hate life. So instead of thinking I can either quit my job today and YOLO all my money away because tomorrow's not promised, or I can be at a job that I hate for the next 20 years so that I can give my future self the best possible lifestyle, there is an in between there. You can find a job today that you love that will fund your future self and not make you miserable. I feel like our life decisions are such emotionally charged that it's really hard to think about a balance in between serving your future self and your today self, but it is possible. So, to wrap up, what I would recommend is for you to think about those visceral moments that you've had in your past that you never want your future self to feel again, and write those down. Actually, create a statement for yourself. Never again will I ever allow my future self to XYZ, whatever it is. Then also spend some time getting emotionally connected to your future self. How can you connect yourself to your future self more and more as you move forward through life? Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's finding a picture of an older person that has similar features to you that you can sort of meditate on before you make big life decisions, or create a vision board of the person you want to be when you are 75 or 80. Because I will tell you, if you are like a 20 or 30-year-old person now, you may not be thinking about your 50-year-old self. You may think that your 50-year-old self is going to have it all figured out. And I am going to assure you that person does not. 50-year-olds have things that happen with their body and their health, things that even if they take care of themselves are still going to happen. 50-year-olds still have relationship issues and financial issues and work issues. And then other issues start to compound, like ageism and not being able to find progressive work when you hit a certain age. So these are all the things that I wish somebody had told me when I was 20 or 30 to really pay attention to your future self and get connected to them. Because I'll tell you, I consider myself a very lucky person that I am in my 50s and being as healthy and as flush with resources as I am. And some of that is because I had that visceral connection to my future self. Some of it's just plain old anxiety that makes me worry about my future self all the time. And some of it is a lot of luck and privilege. But to the degree that you can, I highly recommend thinking about that future self, making decisions that align to that future self. And trust me, if you do that more and more, you will become that person that you've always wanted to be, have the life that you always wanted to be. And it doesn't have to be crappy today, and it certainly won't be crappy then. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it made sense. And on that note, I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.